With the recent rapid expansion of Keystone Park, something along the way was bound to go wrong. Normally this is something minor. A staff member takes a sick day. Maybe there's a small problem with the zoo's infrastructure. Typically these issues don't impact the animals who call Keystone Park home. However, today, unfortunately, we weren't so lucky. In an effort to extend our reach and make an impact around the world, about a year ago, we sent out our veteran medical teams to other zoos and reserves around the world. Unfortunately, this left Keystone Park with a skeleton crew. The small team at the zoo was for the most part doing an outstanding job and able to handle any minor injuries that affected our animals. With the limited medical staff already busy with their daily tasks, a highly contagious strain of avian flu was the last thing that we needed. This dangerous disease primarily affects birds and completely ripped through our penguin flock. As a result, the grand opening of Keystone Park's penguin habitat has been temporarily delayed, with an opening date not yet having been scheduled. A majority of the flock is currently in quarantine, while a few penguins needed emergency surgery to save their lives. Luckily, these are quite resilient birds, and will hopefully recover in no time at all. As for the penguins who weren't exposed to the deadly pathogen, we're going to be monitoring their health very closely. You can never be too careful in the zoo business. This avian flu outbreak truly happened at the worst possible time, because we were already running dangerously low on capital due to having recently remodeled our entire entrance plaza. A common complaint at Keystone Park used to be a lack of options for food and beverage, and we took this as an opportunity to add 3 brand name restaurants to our entrance. Despite not being flashy and not even including a new animal, this was an expensive expansion and took a significant amount of time, resources, and energy to perfect. Although it was pricey, it was worth every single penny, because now that the plaza is 100% complete, it looks absolutely stunning. Guests are going to have plenty of space to explore and move around at their own pace. We intentionally made it rather wide open. Despite being low on funds currently, guests have several incentives to make the trip out to Keystone. For several weeks now, Keystone Park enthusiasts have eagerly waited for our newest member to make her first public appearance. Since her birth just under a month ago, our female bison calf has spent a majority of her life inside. Today she finally received the green light from the veterinary team to venture outside of the backstage. However, she immediately found a pronghorn and ran straight back inside. It seems like she built up enough strength but not enough courage. Eventually, she was forced to leave the backstage once and for all in pursuit of her mother. However, the pronghorn certainly didn't make things easy. Dakota showed great parental instincts, recognizing that the grab ball was making her calf rather uncomfortable. Once it was removed, the herd was finally able to come together and form a single unit for the very first time since the calf's birth. I now officially would like to welcome Martha to Keystone Park. She's grown so much in such little time, and I'm sure the guest will enjoy. According to the IUCN, the American bison is listed as near threatened with a population of 80,000 in the wild. The birth of Martha is truly a conservation win for all. After expensive expansions and battling the avian flu, a surge of guests to the American frontier is precisely what Keystone Park needs to keep our doors open. The baby bison isn't the only reason to travel to Keystone, however. In case you're unfamiliar, Keystone Park also boasts a sizable South America section, home to dozens of different animals. Despite having some South American heavy hitters, like the elusive jaguar and the ever-popular capybara, our most popular exhibit in this section has always been our giant otter. They're such a fun species to sit back and watch. They're highly social animals and incredibly graceful swimmers. Unfortunately, unlike the American bison, they're officially listed as endangered according to the IUCN, with a wild population of less than 5,000. 5,000 might not seem too terribly bad, but when you realize that Keystone Park effectively houses 0.2% of the entire wild population of giant otter, it gets a little bit more serious. In terms of conservation, Keystone Park hasn't had a more significant birth than last year with the arrival of baby Lumi. She's become quite the avid and expert swimmer, being able to tread water even just as long as some of the adults in the family. She can even do this somehow. Typically she uses the water correctly, and is always nearby members of the family to ensure that everything goes well. She is still young after all. Lumi undergoes daily check-ins from our veterinary team to ensure that all is going well in her health. Her ultimate destiny is to be released to the wild with her parents to hopefully form a pack of their own. Just a few days ago, Lumi took a massive leap for the future of the giant otter species. The pup matured right in front of our keeper's eyes. It was truly an incredible sight. She's now officially big enough and strong enough to be released back into the Amazon River. It would be foolish to send a pup as young as Lumi into the Amazon, which is a hazardous environment filled with big predators, alone. Because of this, her mother Paku and father Wake are also going to be released. This is scheduled to take place next month, so if you want to see the family one last time, be sure to stop on by Keystone Park. It'll certainly be sad to see them go, but we'll still have 7 giant otter for you to experience at Keystone Park after the breeding pair is sent to the Amazon. One day I'm confident we'll house more giant otter pups, but that day is far in the future. Let's focus on the present. In case you missed the last episode, we built a relatively simple habitat for a small herd of 3 reindeer. Meet Eric, the sole male and leader of the herd. The other members include Carol, as well as Pavlova. The reindeer adjusted rather quickly to Keystone Park. They spend a majority of their day grazing and playing with their enrichment items. Like their simple habitat, the reindeer tend to be simple creatures, typically keeping to themselves and not causing much of a problem in the grand scheme of Keystone. Due to the unforeseen arrival of the avian flu that we've been dealing with, in hindsight, it's a good thing that the reindeer's habitat was relatively cheap to construct. Although we saved some money on the habitat, we immediately spent it bringing on a new zookeeper who's actually a native to the Alaskan region. Her Inuit heritage is truly going to help bring Polar Point, Keystone's newest expansion, to greater heights that we possibly could have imagined. So far her job is relatively easy. She only has 3 reindeer to look after, but after today, it's going to get a little bit more difficult and mischievous. The reindeer area is exactly halfway in terms of elevation between the ground level / entrance and the tip of Polar Point. It acts more of a transition in between 2 vastly different areas, in which the reindeer can fit into both. We've recently begun detailing and groundskeeping the lands right around the reindeer enclosure, even planting some grass seed. In today's expansion, we're going to continue building up and officially getting into the first building of Polar Point. For the first build of a new area, it's certainly ambitious, but I think we can pull it off. The issue is this wasn't originally the plan and we're working on a limited time frame. The avian flu halted all production east of the king penguin habitat. Unfortunately, we already broke ground, and this makes us significantly behind in today's work. We've also spent a significant amount of resources building this habitat that we currently have no plans to finish. Effectively, this was a waste of money for the time being, although it's going to be much beneficial later when we come back to this project. While brainstorming ways to come up with a little bit more money on a short notice, we realized that we only have one gift shop in Keystone Park, and it's right at the exit. This has sadly never been one of the more popular aspects of the zoo, but I think we can fix our gift shop problem, as well as our money issue, by making an even better gift shop in a different location today. Another way we can fix this problem is by selling more zoo memberships. If you'd like to become a member of Keystone Park and have your name forever immortalized in the zoo, the link is in the description below. Along with that, zoo members get access to videos the second that they're completed and don't have to wait any longer. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. By engaging with the channel in any way, you're telling the YouTube algorithm to push this video to more people, and the more people that watch the video, the more videos I can make. Your endless support truly does fuel the channel's growth. Keystone Park is about to get our second species of fox, and with an IUCN rating of least concern and a wild population of over 110,000, it appears that the Arctic fox is doing just fine. Despite having a vast wild territory spanning 3 different continents, individually they don't need very much space at all, only 200 square meters of land, with nothing else. Like most species we've built for recently, the Arctic fox is described as social. What's interesting, and admittedly a little bit bizarre about their social structure, however, is that they're perfectly capable and even happy being solitary. We'll have to do a little bit of our own research and take some field notes. According to their dietary options, the Arctic fox appears to be strictly carnivorous. They also have some interesting enrichment items, such as the curio ball. If we could somehow recreate the Northern Lights with it, that would be an awesome addition to Keystone Park. Not that any was planned in the first place, but in case you were curious, the Arctic fox doesn't benefit from sharing space with any other species. Today's build is going to be a little bit challenging for one simple reason, and that's that we're dealing with elevation. The Arctic fox is going to have 2 different climates it can enjoy in the habitat. The bottom portion is going to be temperate, just like the reindeer, while the top is going to be more cold and themed to the Arctic. The big open area in the middle is going to be for the gift shop that we're going to add. Before we get to that though, we need to lay some foundation. To start the foundation, we needed to make a retaining wall to clearly differentiate the 2 elevations of the habitat. While doing this, I was extra careful to make sure the retaining wall was about on the same elevation as the path on the second layer. We're building a majority of this on the grid, and trust me, this makes things a lot easier. From here, I took the dry stone walls from I believe the Twilight Pack, made a separate group, and placed them in the exact same spots as I did the wood. The reason that we do this is because typically the foundation of a building has to be made of a more sturdy material than what the rest of the building is. We certainly did a good job of separating the 2 elevations of the habitat. You can clearly see there's a bottom layer and a top layer now. From here you can come back on the grid, making sure to join the same group as you were before. We can then place floorboards all around and blend it perfectly into the elevation on the top. These pieces were just a little bit too big to make a second layer. As you can see, it comes to the floor and makes a pretty ugly texture. The way to fix this is by using the exact same texture, but as the wall portion. You can simply rotate these walls 90 degrees and line up the texture, and it's about half the size, which makes it perfectly fit. Now that the bottom layer of the foundation was in place, I figured we could start working our way out from the middle. To do this, we're going to start with the gift shop. To keep the flooring of the building consistent with the gift shop, we can use these horizontal wood plank textures and place them all over the path just slightly above so the guests can still use it. Now that the flooring is in place, the outline of the building should be a lot more clear. We need to start placing the walls so we can clearly get a definition of the border though. When I place my walls, I typically like to think a couple steps ahead, and what I mean by this is that we just built the indoor viewing of the Arctic fox, so I used wall panels that already have windows cut out into them to make it easier in the future. Using the same train of thought, I wanted to have a big window right in the front of the gift shop so guests can see inside before they even get to the habitat. Other than that, the rest of the build was pretty simple. The only slightly difficult part was making a second wall on the inside to clearly differentiate the border of the gift shop. This build did turn out slightly taller than I expected it to be, but it's not a problem. The only thing that we have to ensure is that the Arctic fox are going to be able to access the second story of the building from the first. To do this, we're simply going to be using some habitat climbing frames to make a ladder that gets them from the first layer to the second. Once the bridge was in place, we used very similar textures to help blend it into the rest of the build. We'll detail more of this later, but for now I think this is good. After adding a few more layers of the wood wall to the exterior of the habitat, the last thing I did for now was add the habitat gate. Obviously it still needs a ton of details, and don't worry, I have plenty in mind, but the initial shaping is solid, and I really see the outline of the build coming together. For now though, I'm thinking we should focus on the gift shop. I have a feeling this isn't going to be easy, and I'd like to get it out of the way. It's certainly been a long time on the channel since we've built a gift shop. Matter of fact, it's been since the second episode of the series. They're certainly not the hardest things to build, but I have a cool idea to make this one special. And I promise it's legal. Modular gift shops are quite easy to set up. Effectively all you have to do is place modular gift shop items, which you can filter for in the Facilities tab, somewhere on the modular gift shop tiles. It's a little bit confusing in this build because we use the exact same floor texture for the rest, but just know that the only part that we can actually place these items on is in the confines of the gift shop. You can place the items absolutely wherever you want and make them any color. You can make them match, make them not match, but as long as they're in the confines of the gift shop, the guests have free range to come in and check out everything in the shop. Once you've found a nice spot for your shelf, you have one more step to do. You actually have to put something on it. And don't worry, it's really easy. All you have to do is click on it and pick an item from the menu. Since this one is right next to the registers, I chose mugs, something small you might get on a last-minute decision. Unless your gift shop is specifically being designed for a certain type of item, like a clothing store in which you might only sell t-shirts and hats, make sure to have a variety of different kiosks because some of them sell different items. I personally find it a bit easier to start with the walls and then work our way to the middle of the shop. You don't want the inside to be completely bare and only have things on the walls. That's just not realistic. When working in the middle of the shop, typically I like to use the smaller shelves. This way guests can see over them and see something in the back they might have otherwise missed. If you mess around with the angles of the interior shelves, you also have room for more than you might realize. The gift shop is now technically fully functional, however functional doesn't necessarily mean good. We still have a lot of detailing to add. When it comes to interior detailing, I typically like to rely a lot on blueprint items from the workshop, as well as facility tab items, like conservation boards, and even some TVs. Since we are in Polar Point, I wanted to give this entire gift shop a more Arctic theme. I used these glacier wall murals because they're incredibly thin. They were really easy to slip behind all of the items that we've already placed without disrupting the rest of the build. I think we did the cold theme rather well, but there's one thing that's missing that's really going to sell the illusion, and take it to the next level. If we can throw a roof over the entire build and get it rather dark, I think we can use green and purple lights to replicate the Arctic auroras. The roof over the gift shop was pretty standard. It was just vertical planks because this isn't going to be able to be seen by the public. The parts of the build that will be able to be seen utilize the Arctic wood trim. This perfectly matches with the wall we used. Both came from the Arctic pack. It's certainly not perfect yet, and it's going to need a lot of tweaking and reshaping, but I'm actually quite happy with the roof in this point of the build. From here we came back into the gift shop and placed 2 lights per row. After this, we changed the color of the lights from either green or pink. I really like how it turned out. We're definitely going to be adding more details later on in the build, but if you have any name ideas for the gift shop, leave them in the comments. After working so long on the gift shop, I figured it's about time we return to where the Arctic foxes are actually going to be housed, the front of the build. I wanted to make their outdoor viewing out of a mesh, and there's one very important detail you have to remember whenever using the material. Animals in real life can bite and claw through it. When dealing with mesh, you always need to add a secondary fence that keeps the guest fingers out of the holes. We're going to be adding that much later in the build process, but that's exactly why we're not building this right next to the curb. Dealing with mesh is relatively easy compared to other materials because you can rotate it simply 90 degrees to get exactly perfect angles. So far this habitat is a little bit square, so when I came in with the roof I decided to make it at about a 15 to 30 degree angle. Connecting the roof to the building wasn't the hard part at all, matter of fact it was quite easy. What was difficult was figuring out exactly what to do with the sides of the build. To cover up the right side, I decided to make a secondary backstage, but this would be in view of the guests. The left side was a lot more challenging because it wouldn't make any sense at all to have a different structure over here. I decided to pretty much leave it for now. The other thing you always have to do when working with mesh is make sure it has a strong support. You always have to have different beams supporting the mesh from various angles, because on its own, it's not realistic to freestand like this. The size and shaping of this build turned out precisely how I wanted it. It's perfectly big enough for the 3 Arctic fox to have plenty of space to be social or on their own, but it's not too big to where it's going to take away from other habitats in the area. Unfortunately, we were left at this pretty wide open space right next to the habitat, and for the longest time I had absolutely no idea what to put here. I felt like if we added an extension to the habitat, it would become too big, so we needed a different idea outside of the box. I realized a custom shop might be exactly what we were looking for, but what would the shop be selling? This. If you're unfamiliar, this is called a gem sifter, and it's a very popular attraction around some zoos in the Midwest United States. Effectively, what you do is purchase a bag of dirt with gems inside of it. You'll then pour the bag of dirt into these sifters. You then put the sifters into the running water stream, and it gets rid of the dirt and leaves only the gems behind. It's quite the fun activity and is especially enjoyed by the younger guests at zoos because it gives them not only something to physically interact with, but something also to take home as a memory. As fun as it may be, if we can't make it a reality, then it has no place at Keystone Park. The most difficult part is going to be making a track for the water to run, because without running water, this thing is useless. Surprisingly, this wasn't very hard, but what was extremely difficult was making the water look good. These absolutely require running water, but you also don't want the guests to get soaked while they do it, otherwise it just won't be any fun. It took a lot of tinkering to get the water streams to go exactly where we wanted it to, but I think we got a good illusion in the end. I'm also going to point out now that it took way too long to detail this water tank and get it exactly how I wanted it. I was quite happy with how it turned out now, but trust me, this will come back in a second. Certainly not bad for a first draft, but trust me, it gets a lot better and more detailed. Yes, so the barnyard pack just came out. Would have been nice yesterday. Frustrations about wasting my time aside, the barnyard pack had some shockingly good pieces. I especially like these crates because they made convincing sifters. I never would have guessed out of all the DLC packs to come out, the barnyard pack would have some of the more helpful pieces in this build. Despite being an overwhelmingly Arctic-themed build, I think we need some greenery in here. Remember, this bottom layer is supposed to be a little bit more temperate to match the reindeer enclosure. To help the build better blend into the landscape, I made a very small retaining wall made out of some rocks on the left side. Rockwork is one of the easier aspects to get good at quickly in Planet Zoo in my opinion, because realistically all you have to do is use a bunch of rocks with random rotation on, and you'll get so many angles that eventually it'll look good if you just keep placing them. After the rocks were all in place, I added some realistic supports to the bridge that we made for the Arctic fox to get from the second layer to the first. I always like building with the preset climbing structures because you can use the nails on some of the pieces to easily line up supports. Flipping focus to the inside, I then added some heaters all around to make the inside significantly cozier in case, albeit unlikely, the Arctic fox get too cold. Doing the complete opposite to the outside, and knowing that we're going to have snow in this habitat, I added some coolers. Now, Planet Zoo logic adheres to real life in several ways, and the freezing temperature of water is absolutely one of those things. It has to be at least 32 degrees Fahrenheit, or... wait a minute. 0 degrees Celsius for there to be snow present. After placing the coolers, I felt it necessary to place some habitat bedding so the Arctic fox are as warm as possible when they don't necessarily want to be cold. After that, I placed a variety of other enrichment items all around their habitats, including tennis balls, blood scent markers, among other things. You'll never guess what plant we use next. The buffalo grass placed in this habitat had to have slightly more thought than normal because we didn't want it to burst through the curb or the wall of the habitat. This certainly wasn't hard per se, but at the same time it wasn't as mindless as normal. After all of the buffalo grass was finally in place, I used these rustic metal fences from the barnyard pack to make that secondary fence. Now that the guests won't be able to reach over to the fence, the Arctic fox won't be able to bite them in retaliation, so it's a win for both species. After I place the buffalo grass, the very next step I typically will do is place Aquatic Faux Rocks 9. I really like these because when you sink them into the ground and make them a realistic color, they act as a very nice texture in the ground to help break up all of the greenery. When placing these, you have to have a bit of forethought because certain smaller species of animals, depending on their hitbox, can have their traversable area impeded by the rocks. Luckily, this didn't affect the Arctic fox in any way. I think we sunk them just low enough into the ground where they look good, but were also functional. For once, I wasn't a huge fan of how the buffalo grass looked on the outside of the habitat, so I came in with a very small layer of crowberry bushes to place over the grass to make an interesting texture merging the two plants as one. At this point, a majority of the habitat was relatively detailed, but you'll notice I left a pretty big area of just plain light dirt. This is where I plan to come in with the snow, and I'm not going to detail the snow with many plants at all, because this is going to sell the illusion that it's actually significantly deeper than it is. With the ultimate goal of this habitat being a transitional period between the temperate reindeer enclosure and the significantly colder polar point, I did add a little bit of dirt and snow in small patches all around the habitat to sell the illusion that it's a bit melted. To get some plant diversity in the habitat, I added a few different species of grasses and bushes all around. A majority of the time, the more different plant species you add, the more different textures you'll have in the build, and most of the time, this will make it more visually interesting and look better. After a majority of the foliage was in place, I took some time to make some safety railings for the fox to make sure they didn't jump and fall from too high up. Overall, I think this is on track to be one of our best builds yet, and the best part is, it's not even close to being done. The outside of the building in particular looks a bit rough. What's important now is that we certainly built a standout habitat for the 3 Arctic fox to enjoy once they get to Keystone Park. We still have a bit of time though, so let's finish the outside of the building. Other than the wood needing a bit more texture, I think the front of the build is relatively complete. Let's start our focus towards the back. In order to keep everything cool, we're going to need a relatively powerful air conditioning unit on the roof. Once the temperature of the building was perfectly regulated, I then added some wooden trims all over every single window of the entire build. After that, I came above the mesh and added in some windows. This did 2 things. It added some depth to the build and broke up the wooden texture. To go the extra mile, I even designed a little overhang. One thing that in my opinion so many builders neglect in their projects are gutters. Excess water has to go somewhere, and if left stagnant can truly damage a build, so if you want to capture that realism, add gutters to your works. Try and think about where the water would naturally flow, and place the gutters accordingly to combat it. After I recolored these blinds from the conservation pack, I realized that they worked perfectly in both size and scale of the build. I ended up placing them all over the habitat. I quite liked the effect that they gave off. I then shifted my focus towards the exterior's lighting, and since this is still a part of the temperate area, I used relatively basic Planet Zoo lamps from the base game. Finally, I lined the build with some relatively small New World lights from the North America pack. These are tiny but pack quite a punch. This looks significantly better already, but I think there's still even more details that we can add to the build. We're gonna have to hurry though, the Arctic fox are on their way to the habitat right now. One of my absolute favorite building tricks in all of Planet Zoo is utilizing these moss textures in a very creative way. If you color them to a similar hue as your path, you can make them appear as almost scuff marks on the path. These are slightly difficult to place, a lot more difficult than the faux rocks and the buffalo grass, because you can't really place them everywhere. They have to be relatively spaced out, but not far enough apart where they look weird and eye-catching. While building, I realized I could use the exact same trick, but color the textures white, and then make them appear as snow on the wood. I think this was especially effective on the roof. It adds just that bit of texture and color that really makes it pop. After I got the outside to the point where I was relatively happy, I shifted my focus towards the interior. Most of what we placed in here are simple repeats from other areas of the build. One trick I always utilize when using the education soundboard is recoloring it to the animal that's themed in the habitat. In this case, it's white. Just a few benches, education boards, and security cameras later, the habitat was done. The rest of the build was more of the same, pretty much just adding the exact same trims and lighting details we have been the entire time. To keep with the theme of temperature regulation, a lot of the lights I used were these fans from the Europe pack. This will add even more cold air flowing throughout the building. I'm especially proud of how the interior turned out, because we actually spent the least amount of time on this, but I think it looks sleek in its simplicity. Since this is connected to the gift shop after all, we do have plenty of security cameras all around. For a majority of the last portion of the details, it was more or less replicating what we've already done, making the build look good from all angles. A few things I was especially proud of in this portion though, were adding these special effects that made it look like the snow was kicking up in the wind. The more moving parts your habitat has, the more dynamic it becomes, and more dynamic habitats are always more interesting to watch and observe. Lastly, I added a couple of custom education pieces off the workshop. I also really like these and will frequently use them in builds. Now that's more like it. I certainly think this is one of the best builds in all of Keystone Park to date, and be sure to let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I think my favorite part has to be the gem mining though. It turned out pretty much exactly how I wanted it to, and I'm quite proud. Thankfully, the habitat passed our keeper's final inspection, so it's ready for the Arctic fox. I'm almost certain the little guys are going to enjoy this entire habitat, but we won't have to wait long to find out ourselves. The trio of Arctic fox are on their way right now. Let's prepare for their arrival.
Hey, old chum.
Meet the ever-so-mischievous Arctic fox. They spent no time at all trying to figure out a way to get out of their habitat, but welcome to Keystone Park anyways. Unfortunately for the Arctic fox, I think no matter how hard they try, they're gonna be stuck in here for— What the? One layer of elephant grass under the path later, and now the habitat is secure. Anyways, officially meet the Arctic fox, and welcome to Keystone Park. Figuring out a way to escape the habitat within 5 seconds of being in was certainly impressive, but with a face this cute, we can hardly hold a grudge. The Arctic fox were quick to explore absolutely every square inch of their habitat, including the area that only they can access. Not even the keepers can get in here. For an animal prone to critical amounts of stress, we figured this was an important aspect of the habitat to include. Speaking of the Arctic fox stress levels, we were expecting and anticipating this to be a much larger issue, but luckily our keepers have reported no signs of stress so far. Our keepers heavily believe that this is because of the Arctic fox's private area, which all 3 of them have been reported to use. This is precisely why we put a habitat webcam in here. You can still enjoy the Arctic fox, and they can enjoy a stress-free environment. Admittedly, it took them a little bit longer to adjust to their habitat than most other species, but this was perfectly anticipated by our keeper staff. The reason we started Polar Point with the Arctic fox is to give them more than enough time to adjust to their habitat without the guest. That's going to be a big step for them, and they're going to have months before Polar Point officially opens to the public to adjust to Keystone Park. I think we should give the foxes a bit of time to adjust as well. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and I'll catch you in the next one. See you next Saturday. Kingpin out.